Hello, Sean Eddings here. Welcome to the MicroCapClub Member Spotlight. In these interviews, we'll showcase many of the talented members on MicroCapClub. Today, we have Andrew Rem, founder of Odinson Partners. Andrew, thanks for joining.
Hey, thanks for having me, Sean. This is awesome.
Tell us a little bit about your background and what you're doing today.
Sure. So I kind of came to investing late. So I want to say I started at 30, but I was like 2 weeks from being 31. So, and then I'll maybe parse my career into kind of three parts. So the first 10 years, I wore a number of different hats, but essentially worked on a small cap growth strategy as a junior analyst, and then kind of went through a near-death experience with the firm, which caused me to join another firm. And that small cap growth strategy was my first introduction to microcaps. And so that strategy, we maybe had, and this was in the late 90s, early 2000s, we would have had maybe 10 or 15% of the portfolio that would have been sub 300 million. And then the natural bias of that portfolio structure also, like our weighted average market cap would have been less than $1 billion. So we would have been, maybe 200 million smaller than the benchmark at the time. So we operated just naturally smaller end of small caps and the high end of microcaps. So that was my first introduction. Then from there, the near-death experience kind of caused me to go across the street to a small cap value strategy in a much larger firm. And the culture and the environment there was completely different. Like microcaps were like toxic. And so I already had developed this natural affinity to the smaller end of small caps. And so I was constantly kind of wrestling there. So running a small cap strategy, I did that for 13 years. And then I got the opportunity to leave. So I'll come back and talk a little bit more about the small cap value strategy. And then the last 2 years doing just kind of dedicated around kind of micro and small cap. And so if I could maybe kind of paint the arc from going institutional small cap to what I'm doing today, there's a couple of things. When I was on the small cap value, initially, we had really good performance, and I started getting frustrated that the firm wasn't marketing the product. And so we're putting up good numbers. I'm feeling good about my performance and the fund's performance. We're not marketing. Then that kind of bled into frustration with like the trajectory of my career path and kind of the cadence. So then I started looking externally, like looking for jobs, but also maybe more importantly, just meeting other investors outside the firm, and you start meeting some interesting people. So that was good item number one. I tend to be an introvert. Today, I describe myself as being an aspiring extrovert. But then you start meeting interesting people, and lo and behold, they read. And I didn't really read too much, like a book or two a year, something like that. So I start reading more. Then I get introduced to somebody puts me onto Patrick O'Shaughnessy, and at first it was just his website, which I think was called Investor Field Guide. And he's reading 80 or 100 books a year, and I'm like, oh Lord, I gotta up my game. So I start upping my game, and then you start getting smarter as an investor. And hey, maybe we're doing some things wrong. Maybe there's things that we should be doing differently. Then he starts a podcast, right? And Ian is in the first year, I believe, if I remember right. I think it was in 2017, Ian gets profiled. So that's, hey, somebody smart is out there working on microcaps. Oh, by the way, he's got this MicroCapClub. And oh, by the way, he also wrote these books with you, Intelligent Fanatics, which caused me to read both of those books, which are fantastic. They pair well with Outsiders. And actually, I read all three of them again earlier this year, trying to bring that stuff into my process. So then the next thing was, so there was something that happened personally that kind of put the pause button in terms of finding a job outside of my current situation. But I started thinking more about how, if I was going to start my own strategy, what would it look like? What are the things that we're doing wrong? What are the things that we could do better? So this is just kind of ruminating in the back of my head. And then I started doing some things to kind of push against my firm. And one of them in 19, I got them to pay for me to go to the summit.
Okay.
And so I had to, like, I didn't say, hey, I've got to join the MicroCap Club. I just said, like, the total cost is like $500 or whatever. And then I get them to turn it into a T&E expense. So they really didn't have a reason to send me there because remember, microcaps are toxic, right? But I convinced them like that this made sense. And so I go to that, and of course, it doesn't drive me to action, which in retrospect was just stupid. But the next thing that happened is COVID. And in May of 20, my firm decided they offered a voluntary separation program to all employees. And as soon as that hit the wire, I'm like, I got to do that. And so I wasn't completely defined in, okay, this is what I'm going to do. But at the end of 20, that process completed. So I leave the firm at the end of 20. I took about 6 months or so to kind of figure out like what's next, and then went through a process of like setting things up. So I feel like my starting date and on the microcaps is like 1/1/22. And so that's what gets me this arc to kind of MicroCap Club, and what I'm doing today. So yeah, that's kind of, sorry, long-winded, a little bit of background and arc to like how I land here.
Yep. And so I heard you talking about the first job that you had. There was a blow up in terms of, I'm guessing, the company strategy, whatever. Could you talk a little bit about something you learned from that?
This was a phenomenal situation for me, like work environment. It was a 3-person team where it was a boutique firm. And when I first got there, there was 3 growth strategies: small, mid, large. And they hired me to do this other thing, marketing research. And I'm like, yeah, I can do that. But I really want to be an equity analyst. And I got them to, I said, if I will join you guys and I'll do that thing that you want me to do. But I was thinking in my head, like, that's going to take like 30% of my time. Right. I said, if you can get one of your portfolio managers to sponsor me, like I want to work with them directly as a junior analyst. And the small cap growth, boom, he raises it. Yes, I'll do that. And in his head, he's just like, great, I've got this young guy that wants to do grunt work. And he was a one-man band. So this was awesome for him. So it was a really great, and he was a great mentor. Shortly after I joined, he ended up hiring a senior analyst, and the 3 of us had a really, really strong working environment. What happened in the blow up was effectively, there was kind of an ugly divorce, but the essence of it was the 2 firms split, and we got kind of a firm in the box. So it was actually the only example that I know of where one product spun out from the other firm, and we took all the assets and accounts of ours on our strategy with us, and that's why I say firm in the box. The problem was we were hyper concentrated in accounts. So we had, I think when we split, we had 12 accounts, but like 3 of them. So I think we had maybe 650 million in assets, and we had 5 really small accounts. So like sub 50 million. And then we had 3 accounts that were over 300 million each. When we physically moved, so the first year was just like an operating agreement. We stayed in the same offices, blah, blah, blah. The second year was a physical separation. So we moved across the street. When we did that, all of a sudden, all these tripwires in the sand went off, and we didn't know about any of them. And so it was goofy things like nobody wanted to be more than X% of assets under management. You couldn't be below X number of clients. And so it was just like this cascade. As soon as, or dominoes, as soon as one tripped, it caused another one, which caused another one. And we had some tough performance in 2004 because we didn't have energy exposure. So I guess that's an explanation. What did I learn from that? One is team. That was just this insanely great team to work with. So me leaving was a really bittersweet departure, but we had no assets, and I just felt like the right thing. He didn't need me there. I didn't have, like, he and the other guy, they were totally fine without me. But I couldn't like support myself. Like I didn't have the ability to not get paid.
Right.
So I felt like the right thing to do. But so it taught me a lot about like what does a good leader look like and what does a good team look like. And I guess it taught me a little bit in terms of like those tripwires in the sand. And I had already learned some stuff in terms of like product marketing. So I think, yeah, the biggest thing was just more about like what is a good team dynamic and what's kind of good leadership.
Great. Andrew, so now you're running your own firm. Tell me what your process, your strategy is currently, and I guess your strengths as well in investing.
Okay, so on the strategy side, there's things here like most all of this stuff is different, but I think for you guys, like I'm talking about making vanilla ice cream here. I'll just plow through it and be like, yep, you're right. This is all vanilla ice cream, nothing to see here. So I'm a concentrated portfolio, less than 20 stocks. I'm long-term oriented, kind of 5 to 7 years and longer, because if I want to own a compounder, if I want to own multi-baggers, I think that's the mindset you have to be. I'm going to come back to that because I've kind of nuanced my view there. On valuation, and again, I'm coming out of a world where we were looking for stocks that would, generate 20 to 30% upside over the next 12 months. And that's kind of silly. And so now I come across this guy who's like, yeah, I need a stock that can at least double in like 3 years. And I'm like, boom, I love that. So that's my valuation. I want something that's going to at least double in 2 years. And I really love when people start talking about situations like, I think this could be a 5-bagger over the next, 4 or 5, like awesome. I want more of that. So it's just a different mindset, super refreshing and energizing. So that's valuation. On risk, I just try to parse out the difference between risk and volatility, a little bit of Howard Marks there, right? And just saying on volatility, I'm just trying to answer the question. Like, I don't care simplistically. I don't care about volatility. I just ask the question, is this an opportunity or not? And then I want to get better at risk. So these aren't the same thing. And I think like a pre-mortem is one of the ways I can get better at risk. And then that can also inform my research process. So risk isn't like a one and done thing. And it's not like list out, 10 items that are risk. It also informs what are the things that I constantly need to come back to as it relates to risk. The last thing that I say is we're market cap and style agnostic. And one is because on style, like I've done growth, I've done value. For me, it's not a difference that matters. And then so it's not really how I think about things. On the market cap, it's very much a learning from my institutional background, which is I just think it's stupid to sell something because it's too big. And I think it's stupid not to buy something because it's too small or illiquid. So so that's okay. So that's kind of my description of the strategy. The nuance on the long term. So Ian has talked about this. Other people have talked about it, which is you got it like long-term orientation. Like that sounds great. Low turnover. Yeah. Like, but you got to focus on execution. So for me, it's what is execution? So really trying to define that for each situation. What is that? What are the situations where you're going to add versus trim, and try to make those decisions ahead of time. The other thing is I got to get better at research, because you have to be able to have the temerity. You're going to, if you want to own a 10, 20, 50 bagger, 100 bagger, you have to have the temerity to live through downdrafts. And you can't live through a downdraft if you aren't smart enough to know when to hold on and when to let go. And then the other two parts of that, because I think Ian just had something on this. I don't know if it's here, but he's written about this, like cut bait fast, right? Sell things quickly. You make dumb mistakes, move on. I suck at that. So long ways to go there. And then the other thing that people have talked about is add to your winners. I suck at that too. So that's another thing that is hard in terms of that long-term orientation. If you're going to really amp up on the long-term winners, you have to have that willingness to add at higher prices. Because my natural tendency is, I just did, I think I posted on Dice a while back, but that's like, it's come down and I've added to my position. We'll see if I'm right.
Right.
But, and then like in microcaps, I've heard people talk about, like, it's dangerous to do that. So I have to be, if I have a natural bias to do something really stupid, that's one of them. So I have to really coach myself. So I think that's kind of the strategy. And I just think that over time it can kind of nuance. There's some things that will be steadfast on in terms of the long-term orientation, being concentrated, valuation, improve on risk, those things. But I think there's some nuances inside that. So I don't think, again, I don't think my strategy, like, it's vanilla.
Right.
Who cares? It's just vanilla. Hopefully maybe I can make like Neapolitan or something at some point. I don't know.
Or maybe to take that vanilla and put some rainbow sprinkles on it or something like that.
Yeah. I add something that can spice it up a little bit for sure. So, getting to your other question in terms of like, what are your strengths? What make you unique? I think I'm pretty effing boring. I don't think I'm particularly unique at all. That said, maybe I can try a different shot at trying to answer that, which is, I do feel like I'm working on reinventing myself as an investor. So the obvious way is the microcaps, right? And there's first demonstrate skill in microcaps, and then at some point I got to move on, and if I can demonstrate that, then the next thing is start going international. So that's one. Another thing is, in my old strategy, or at my last firm, they were sector focused, right? So you had sector responsibilities. And today, like, of course, that's silly. And so I can look across the waterfront and I can say, hey, I just want to find the good fishing spots. Where are the good investment opportunities, and try to seek those out. But that means that I've got this learning curve, that there's a lot of industries that I don't know and understand. So I've got to work on those. I've got to kind of immerse myself. So that's kind of this steep learning curve. So that's another challenge for me in terms of reinventing myself. And then I would say the last thing, a third thing there is, I got to up my game big time on research, and specifically on like sleuth investing, right? That scuttlebutt and, alternative sources, because I did, it was in the back of my mind. I knew that as an institutional investor, I was taking some shortcuts, using sell side, and I don't have that anymore. And so I've got a great opportunity to do a much better job and up my game in terms of research. And then lastly, I would say that I really like this idea of kind of honing your craft. So you hear these great athletes talk about honing their craft, and I've struggled with it, because in sports, you spend 95% of your time practicing and 5% playing the game.
Right.
And there's also like a phenomenal feedback loop. And investing is like the inverse. The feedback loop sucks. There's a lot of false positives, and most of the time you're playing the game and very little you're practicing. So I've been challenged a little bit, like, what is that? How do I translate that to investing? And I've kind of tried to land on tentatively 3 things, which is to hone my craft. One is I read and I need to keep that up. So that's how I can keep improving my knowledge base. And then that feeds into investing. Second is interviewing. And I want to come back to that because the community has been awesome in that regard. And then the third one is just like up my game on research and specifically on kind of doing sleuth research. And that ends up being like this virtuous cycle. So read improves my knowledge base, improve at and interviewing, and that will also improve my abilities in terms of sleuth investing, which can inform reading and just go round and round and just crank that wheel. And so on the interviewing, a couple months ago, I came across, Ian wrote a piece, I can't remember if it was a link or at the bottom of the article. He referenced a piece that was written, I think that he wrote in 2014, which had to do with like interviewing management. So in the back of my mind, like interviewing, I've been ruminating, like I need to get better at this, but not really doing a great job at it. Certainly not intentional practice, but I've gotten a little bit better over time. That article pointed me to another article, which I think he wrote that in October. Then Chip Maloney, who just did the tiny business breakdown last week, he did an article and he laid out like, here's 7 or 8 things you need to do to improve at. And I'm like, bam, like I incorporated 3 or 4 of those things right away. So it was like open-ended questions, how, what, why, neutral, and then, you know, lean questions. Like, and these last 2, I suck at both of them. And so after the tiny, I sent him a note and said, hey, thanks, that was awesome. I'm going to start tracking tiny. I got to figure that one out. And then also just said, thanks for this article. Because at the end of his article back in 2014, someone in the comment section had written, hey, do you have anything on John Sawatsky, who is this guy he referenced in this article?
Yep.
And he could have just said, you know, dude, just like Google John Sawatsky, you'll find him, right? But like, this is exactly how you know that you've got a high quality person on the other end, because his response was, he had like 10 or 12 links that he posted in his response. And it was like articles written on John Sawatsky, his principles and processes. There was some interviews. It was just like, he saved everybody a ton of time. He didn't need to do that, right? So that's one of my hacks to, you want to know when you come across a quality person, Chip, thank you very much. That was awesome. And then, so reaching out to him, I asked him a question, which was, do you have any thoughts on feedback or interviewing? Because I think that's one of the things I've struggled with. And he came back and gave me a couple ideas. He told me one of the things that he does at work, and that sparked an idea in my head that, hey, getting better at interviewing isn't just a management conversation. You gotta treat all your conversations like an interview. And if you get your head in those situations off asking open-ended, neutral, lean questions, then it's going to be a lot easier. Because I can hit all 3 of them. When I write them out, I'm there. I'm golden. You get in the moment, and then you know, I get totally jacked up. So then I was thinking, so he sparked this idea that, hey, you need to be thinking about interviewing in all your conversations. And then I'm like, hey, so I have 4 kids, and 3 of them live relatively close. I get together with one or all of them on a pretty consistent basis every month. And I always ask them questions. Like I'll send them a text, here's 3 questions, because I'm trying to have quality. I don't want to talk about the weather. I don't want to talk about music or movies. Like, let's have good conversations. And I'm like, this is my next experiment. I'm going to tell them what I'm going to try to do. And then I'm going to say, do you mind if I record? And the best would be if I can give them real-time feedback. So they can say, I just tell them, here's what the 3 things I got to improve on. And they can give me real time, right? If you have kids, I think even if you have little kids, I still think you can do it. They might be about being able to do the real-time feedback. But anyway, like that's the power of this community is you can see, it's really, I think it's easy to see high quality people. And my job, I believe, is I gotta, not only do I have to up my game as an investor, like I have to work really hard on doing high quality work that other people will find that, like that's how I earn my keep in this group. It's super easy for me to derive value. And I would say the other thing that I need to do is just like leaning in, reaching out to people and trying to make those connections. Like kind of the world is your oyster in this community. Like it doesn't take very much, but you have to be intentional about it. And you can, I mean, like hands down, I'm going to get I already have. I've gotten way more from this community than I've given. And so that's my, like, I've got to really lean in. I've got to, like, I don't know. I'm rambling. I got to change my game. I got to really work on earning my keep.
So it sounds like you're definitely in a good place now running your own firm, and the community has been quite valuable for you so far, but it sounds like you're really trying to up your game to reach the same, and I feel the same way. When you're around people that are operating at a very high level, it's like you just want to get to their level as soon as possible. And the value that you extract from them, it's like you want to give more, right?
Yeah, I mean that Adam Grant has the book Give and Take.
Yep.
And for me, again, very aspirational. Like I wanna earn my key. I want to be a giver, right? And that, like, how you get better is being around better people. But the way you get around better people is you have to create value for them. You can't just be kind of a parasite, right? Maybe that's not a correct way of saying it, but yeah. Like you can't just use people. You've got to give first and don't expect anything in return. And I think, like, I love the concept of serendipity. I've been blown away. Like you grind and grind and grind, and then all of a sudden, like especially meeting people, right? You grind it, talk to a lot of people, have coffee with people, all that kind of good stuff. Like nothing, and then all of a sudden, bam! It only takes one person, like, to kind of rock your world, so to speak. And that's how, like, I feel like my whole life, my whole career, like I said, like my career has not followed the trajectory and always had these obstacles. I was the youngest of 6 kids, so I always feel like I'm the little kid chasing after the big kids. And this community is very much that, exactly what you said. Like there's really smart people doing phenomenally great work, and the only way that I can try to get into their universe is generate better thoughts and ideas that might be of value to them. So anyway, yeah.
Thank you again, Andrew. I really enjoyed chatting with you today. Are there any other places on the internet that we can find you other than at MicroCapClub? I'll throw your handle for MicroCapClub down below, but are there any other places? What's your website for your firm?
Yeah, my website, I've not turned it on live yet, so probably should get that out. My email is just Andrew at Odinson Partners, which is ODINSON partners.com. I guess I have a Twitter handle, but like I don't have any followers, so that's probably not a good place to connect me. And I'm not active on Twitter. I don't know. That's on the to-do list, but anyway. So yeah, Andrew at OdinsonPartners.com is probably the best way. Definitely reach out for whatever reason if I can be helpful. Like to do that. Yeah.
Thanks again, Andrew. You have a good one.
All right. Thanks, Sean. Appreciate it.